Overnight, we learned there will be a public hearing tomorrow on the proposed red flag gun law. You will see a question about this on your ballot this fall.
Red flag alerts? How they're using Lewiston to steal your rights. I'm Drew Hoagland, and this is The Main Perspective. Today, we're talking about red flag laws, yellow flag laws, whether they're necessary or should be abolished. We're going to take a look into all of it, and we're going to study together. So without further ado, let's dig in.
We'll start this half hour at the State House. That's where opponents and supporters of a ballot initiative for a red flag gun law are gathering right now for public hearing that was originally not supposed to take place.
Our Donovan Lynch is in Augusta monitoring that hearing. Donovan, what can you tell us?
Sam and Brian, we just heard highly anticipated testimony from the Maine State Police, a lieutenant calling this push for a red flag law, saying it could have diminishing returns. Now, what we're dealing with here is a ballot initiative that, if passed by voters in November, would allow family members of a loved one in crisis to directly petition a judge to remove that person's firearms. That's going a step further than the current yellow flag law on the books here in Maine. Now, as much as testimony in this hearing has been passionate, the news is also the hearing itself. Now, Democrats on the Judiciary Committee argued about 3 weeks ago that because this red flag bill is headed to the voters, it does not need a public hearing. At the time, they said that there was no Republican resistance. However, weeks later, Republicans said a hearing must be held on this, what they called a dangerous initiative. And finally, Democrats did relent. This hearing was not anticipated to be held. It was announced just days ago, and here it has attracted many advocates on both sides. But I want to show you a little bit of what Democrats and Republicans had to say about the idea of finally holding this public hearing after much debate over whether it was required to be held at all. Take a listen.
It seemed like the easiest way to dispel all of the misinformation was to plan a public hearing, have the public hearing occur, and then move on and not really have any more confusion or delays.
It was important to us because it is in fact the law that we have this public hearing. So I think that was one of our biggest driving factors. But obviously we want the people of Maine to get the information they need to make an informed decision.
And just to reiterate, this is not a normal bill, so to speak. Since it has collected signatures as a citizen initiative, it will head to the ballot in November unless the legislature does choose to pass this bill with no changes. That is considered very unlikely. There could be a competing measure that would land on the ballot that the legislature could pass. That also is seen as unlikely. I'll send it back to you, Brian and Sam.
Donovan Lynch, live for us in Augusta tonight. Donovan, thank you.
Wow. I have many thoughts on that. The first, to me, is the most obvious. Democrats were trying to not have this public hearing, arguing that because we're going to vote on it in November, we don't need to have a discussion on it now. That's backwards. Because in a democracy, and let's be clear, America, the United States of America, is not a democracy. What it is, in fact, is a constitutional republic. So, those things vary, but in a constitutional republic, when people speak up like this, it needs to be heard, it needs to be spoken about, the people need to be informed. And that's where politicians seem to be different than statesmen. And I'm going to do a video on this in the future on politicians versus statesmen, because in the past, our politicians were statesmen. Now, we have individuals that are politicians that look nothing like what the past would have been used to. And we've been so desensitized to it that we almost don't see an alternative. But there is an alternative. They don't want us to know about it because the less informed we are, the better workers we are. And maybe it's because I was homeschooled. And shout out to my parents right now, because you homeschooled me and I was against it. I was so heavily against it at the time. Now I'm looking at it as a godsend, because thank God I did not get indoctrinated into modern day complicit, content thoughts, like where they're just content thinking the thoughts that they're told. That's not me. I was watching a video earlier and it was talking about like who to trust and whatnot, and the person I was watching said that research mentioned something else and then was like experience and then research. So ultimately it came down to research, and I thought about it in my own life and I realized I don't need to see something for myself. But if somebody else sees something, or somebody else tells me about an experience, or I experience something myself, I always research. And if there's a God, for atheists out there, I do believe there is a God. And since I believe there is a God, I think that's what God wanted, was us to question, to dig further, to look into, to not give up. And scripture is written in such a way that if your brain is an IQ of 70 or your IQ is 160, the Bible can match you. And if you don't believe me, look into it. We're going on to a tangent, but not exactly, because the founding fathers espoused biblical views, and that's what built our Constitution, which is completely different than anything else presented on the planet before, during, or since. They've tried, but they've never come close. And I'm not sure, was it a godsend that did this, or was it some form of Freemasonry worship, occult worship? Because there's definitely aspects of that. Not getting into it in this video, just laying the foundation that it's not all as it presented. However, what is presented is the Second Amendment in the Constitution, and that is firm. And I'm not a fan of trampling or doing any of those measures to water it down. And getting into this next video, as I ramble on, we're going to look at a red flag law enacted in Massachusetts and how I'm not going to say how it went down, because it did go down, but how people that support red flag laws, like, what do they expect otherwise? And we're going to watch the video. I'm not a fan of the female cop and how she approaches the situation afterwards. I'm only mentioning female cop because it's easy to identify during the interview. I don't like her approach. Whether she was male or female, that approach, she's arrogant and overstepping, and not a fan of that kind of policing, because she's trampling, and police are supposed to walk the line, not dip below the line. And I feel like this next video dips below the line. Let me know what you think. Let's dig in.
An Anne Arundel County man is dead after officers say he refused to give up his gun to police.
Officers shot and killed him at his home this morning, where they were attempting to enforce the new red flag law.
Police now guarding the street where their attempt to enforce the new red flag law turned fatal hours earlier. Around 5:15 in the morning, Anne Arundel County police say they came to a home on Linwood Avenue near Broadview Boulevard to take weapons from 60-year-old Gary Willis. They say 2 officers knocked on the door and Willis answered, armed with a handgun. Sergeant Jacqueline Davis says at first he put the gun down and stepped outside to talk with police.
He was fine with the officers until they told him, hey, we're serving you with this order, and this order orders us from the court to take your guns.
At that point, she says Willis went for his gun. One of the officers tried to grab it out of his hand, and Willis pulled the trigger. That bullet didn't hit anyone, but it prompted the other officer to open fire, shooting and killing the gun owner.
I am willing to give up my Second Amendment right if it means that it starts saving lives. I said what I said.
We live during a time where people call you evil simply for having a different political opinion. Hell, many anti-gunners think simply owning an AR-15 makes you a potential mass murderer, and a lot of these people are the same judges who would be deciding these red flag law cases. The potential for abuse of red flag laws is simply staggering, and considering the lengths I've seen anti-gunners go to silence and disarm gun owners, giving them red flag laws is like giving a child dynamite. It's only a matter of time before something goes wrong. And by the way, every one of the founding fathers would have been red flagged.
Let's go back to that first video. I don't want to interrupt too often, but I want to also reference videos that we watched before. I don't believe that red flag laws are constitutional. And going back to that last video, dude had it right. He's a lawyer. The lawyer had it right. That the founding fathers, the very people that are responsible for us having the freedoms to do what we do here in America, are the very people that made it so we have no kings in 2025. The whole protest of no kings, we don't have a king. We democratically elected him. The people voted and we chose him. So anyone that's up in arms about that, just remember, it goes both ways. That is how democracy, which America is not, we are a constitutional republic, but democracy goes both ways. Sometimes you agree, sometimes you disagree. But if over 50% vote in that way, if the majority votes in that way, go out, start your own citizens initiative, try and raise awareness, support peacefully, not like the peaceful protests of 2020 or of today. But I have a hard time not siding with Willis from the very first video because he complied. When the police showed up, he had a handgun, which is not illegal. It could have been anyone, and that's what it is. He's the king of his own palace, which is common law, which our Constitution is based on, which goes back hundreds of years. So he's a king of his own castle. He answers the door with a gun. He puts it down. The issue he even steps outside of his dwelling. Doesn't have to, but he does. The issue arises when they try and confiscate his Second Amendment right. And the police officer, the female officer, she's so arrogant. And again, it's not because she's female, it's because she's arrogant. And I'm just pointing it out because it's easy to identify her that way. Come for me. So that kind of arrogance, that's above the law. That's too much. That's not what the law dictates. She's going for the spirit of the law. No. She's going for the letter of the law and some. And as a police officer, I genuinely believe you should be going more for the spirit of the law and using discretion and previous precedent, not going for that hard letter of the law and even steps above, because she does. That second video makes me sad. And I included it because I can talk about it here on the video, but it's a difference when you see it for yourself. And that's where this channel is becoming a little bit more reactionary in the political scope, because I want my viewers to be aware of what is going on and not just taking my word for it. I want you to see it for yourself. And I very rarely ever have time to include links down below. I used to try and say I would, and I really would try, and then I'd try harder and not say it, still not do it, and then I'd say I would do it to try and make myself do it more, and it just doesn't happen. I have, at this point, YouTube, I'm not making money from it, I'm not monetized, but if you include that, I have 3 jobs, and YouTube alone is research, filming, editing, uploading. It adds up. So if you think YouTubers don't work for their money, a lot of them, if they have teams, it's a lot easier, but a lot of YouTubers work for their money. So just give people thumbs up and share, like, comment. It's engagement. And I've said it before, it doesn't sound much to you. And honestly, it really doesn't take much from you. But what it does on the creator's side is it helps push that out, because it's like, hey, this content is worth viewing. So more people are likely to see it. So more people are likely to be drawn in. And for a small channel, it's huge. For big channels, Mr. Beast, I mean, it doesn't matter. But even mid creators where they have 1 million or a couple million followers, that still is a big deal. Anyway, on a tangent. Video 2 makes me sad, because there are literally people that are willing to give up something we fought so hard for. What's ironic is that same individual is probably someone that would be in a No Kings protest. Well, how do you think we have no kings, dude? We have no kings because we had firearms. And we have firearms now which keep kings at bay. So I'm glad I left the left, because it's insane, it's crazy, they don't make sense, and they lemming behind each other, where it's like, okay, like that person said something that I don't really agree with, but they're on my side, so let's just go. That's stupid. That's stupid. When I came across video 3, he's a lawyer, and I include more of his videos later on because he does a much better job. He's much more succinct when he says what I would say, but he does it in a much better way. It gives me hope. And he's not the typical individual that you would imagine being pro-gun, yet here he is as a black male American supporting gun rights because, duh. We're talking about red flag laws here, but what we should do is talk about yellow flag laws for a minute. So before I do any talking, let's just watch a couple videos to figure out yellow flag laws on the books as they are, not for my opinion. Let's dig in.
Law works, and why some say it still falls short.
The danger is the person, the danger isn't the tool.
That was part of Senator Lisa Kiam's inspiration when sponsoring Maine's yellow flag law, the only one in the country, now under scrutiny following a mass murder committed by a man with known mental health issues.
I hold off judgment until we've really sifted through the details.
Investigative information shows that both family and military peers reported concerns to police. Plus, he had 2 weeks of mental health treatment. But the police took no action to remove his guns through Maine's yellow flag law.
Yellow places way too many burdens. If the goal is to get firearms quickly out of the hands of people who are dangerous, yellow is not the way to go.
So what's the difference? Under Massachusetts' red flag law, any relative or roommate who suspects a gun owner is an immediate violent threat can apply for an emergency court order. If a judge approves, the gun owner must temporarily surrender their gun license and their guns. Under Maine's yellow flag law, there's an extra step. Someone who suspects a gun owner is an imminent threat can call the police. Then it's up to them to take the person into custody, order a mental health evaluation, and if they deem it necessary, apply for a court order to get the guns temporarily taken away.
Up until last week, did you feel like it was working according to plan?
Absolutely working well. I think if you compare your numbers in Massachusetts, how often has your red flag law been used effectively?
In Maine, the yellow flag law has been used 82 times since it launched in 2020, but never by the sheriff's department it was reported to. In Massachusetts, a state with 5 times the population, the red flag law has been used just 57 times in 5 years, with guns getting removed just 38 times.
So it seems like our red flag law is maybe underutilized.
Mass Chiefs of Police Association President Thomas Fowler.
This leads me to believe a lot of people don't know about it. So I don't know if maybe a public service campaign or something comes out of this tragedy in Maine that could help inform Massachusetts citizens.
And Massachusetts gun laws are actually in the process of being revised in the legislature right now. Soon, mental health counselors could be added to the list of people eligible to report a dangerous individual. In Boston,
I hate how much effort I had to put into covering up the Lewiston mass murderer's face and name. We should not memorialize that. But I edit it, so I've been editing my videos beforehand so I know more about what I'm going to talk about in the video. So when I was working on this yesterday, that was my thought. Then when I was reviewing it today, I realized that there is a time and place for the history annals, the annals of history to know who did what. So having no record of these sickos, these mass shooters, would not be beneficial. But as a secondary source, I'm not going to memorialize face and name. He's the Lewiston mass shooter. If you don't know who I'm talking about, if you don't know the name and the face that I redacted, do the research on your own. I'm not supporting that. So regardless of whether mainstream news did the right thing or the wrong thing, let's move past that. The main argument, not the state, the main argument is that yellow flag laws failed, and that comes from Groban, and she says that it places too much burden and yada yada yada. You watch the video. What doesn't make sense is Saco police did do their job. They did their due diligence. They went to the Army Reserve where the shooter's base was, where he was supposed to report once a month, and they started to investigate. It's the man. I'll show a picture of him. His face has been redacted. I'm pretty sure I've actually seen his face in other videos, but I didn't dig in deeply enough, and I'm not trying to dox or do any of that, so I'm just gonna show a snapshot later on of the guy that ultimately, if blame has to be placed on someone's shoulder, I think it's him, because, well, we'll get into that. So anyway, the police were halted by the Army Reserve, and so her saying yellow flag laws didn't work, the shooter ended up for 2 weeks in New York in a psychiatric ward. So if yellow flag laws had worked, that should have been enough. But it wasn't enacted, not clear why. If yellow flag laws don't work, will red?
In This Morning, for the first time, we are seeing and hearing how police and members of the Lewiston shooter's Army Reserve unit discuss concerns over his mental health. Our media partners, WMTW, obtaining body camera video showing officers from the Saco Police Department going inside the Army Reserve Center on September 16th. This was after police became aware of threats from he would shoot up the reserve. The day before, deputies with the Saginaw County Sheriff's Office were called to his home for a wellness check, but never saw. In the video, Army Reserve commander tells Saco officers about their request for a well-being check after threats to another soldier.
I spoke with him. He was angry, but never made any specific threats over the phone to me, like, hey, I'm going to come shoot everybody or anything like that. He does have mental health issues. I'd say probably schizophrenia is something with his delusional. We're hearing a lot of things about pedophile, but nobody's saying a word about it. So.
The review also includes the transcript of a conversation between the commander of the reserve unit and a sheriff's office sergeant, where the sergeant discusses Maine's yellow flag law to remove weapons from a person deemed dangerous. That process was never initiated. The report concluded the sergeant was diligent, exploring whether had access to weapons, but said it was reasonable for him to conclude there were insufficient grounds to take into protective custody and seek an order to remove his weapons.
So as I said before, I have a problem with the guy in the Army Reserve, and I'll include the image here. I'm not trying to dox him, I'm not involved, I wasn't involved in the investigation, this is all just my opinion. But there's a lot of back and forth as to whom is to blame, and to me, the guy in the Army Reserve is to blame because he was warned. So he says that he didn't receive any direct threats, but he did receive indirect remarks of threats. So people called him. There's one guy at least. This information is sometimes hard to find now because I was directly involved. I didn't necessarily need to shelter in place, although we were warned to. I couldn't go to work for 2 days. I worked night shift at that point, couldn't go to work. Didn't have to shelter in place, but we complied. Like, us Mainers, we understood that the police needed the road, they needed to be able to have helicopters out and to search the area and not have individuals compromising their investigation accidentally. So most of us in southern Maine, southern and central Maine, just isolated because we wanted to help. So sometimes the information is hard to find because there was so much going on at that point, and now trying to go back and find footage of that, it's flooded. So some of the stuff, I guess you're gonna have to take my word for, but you can do the investigation on your own. There were warnings. The shooter was at a casino with a friend talking about shooting up the Saco base. The friend, I'm pretty sure, was driving, tried to get, I just said his name. I'm gonna have to edit that out. The shooter, I'm pretty sure, got dropped off. Doesn't matter. The buddy that went to the casino with him ended up calling the Saco base and telling him, you need to change the passcodes. This guy's not well. There are things going on. This is not good. He's threatening a mass shooting. He was dismissed because I guess he was unreliable, or he'd been some kind of liability to them. Army Reserve guy, if any one person is to blame. Also, I don't like how he freely diagnosed mental illness, especially schizophrenia. Like, that's a serious claim. And unless somebody has been medically diagnosed that way and they've told you, throwing that term around can be so dangerous, so detrimental. And because I feel like this guy is slightly to blame, I'm wondering if he's trying to put his own blame on a dead guy because it's easiest. And by fucking no means am I a mass shooting sympathizer, because I'm not. They're not human. That's why, even though I just said his name, in editing, I'm gonna skr it out, because hell no. But that doesn't mean we don't ask questions. That doesn't mean that we don't try and figure out why it happened, how to prevent it in the future. Making more laws is like trying to fist sand at the beach. The harder you squeeze, the more you're going to lose, and that's not what we want to do when it comes to human lives. Or removing the ability to protect human lives by taking guns. And sometimes I wonder, because we're talking about yellow flag laws and red flag laws, but then I see videos like the following, and I wonder, do they even know what they're talking about?
Use semi-automatic weapons for? To defend yourself against home invaders, but also, let's be clear, against tyranny.
You said that you could use a semi-automatic weapon to fight tyranny.
Sure.
You mean you'd use it against American troops?
The very existence of the Second Amendment is designed purposefully to empower the people to be able to resist the force of tyranny used against them to step over their natural rights given to them by God. That is why the Second Amendment exists.
Like slightly more than a dozen words in the Second Amendment. Where exactly does it designate why you should be able to buy an AR-15 but not a fully automatic AK-47? Which particular word in the Second Amendment lets you have the AR-15 but not a bazooka? An AR-15 but not a tank? Where in the Second Amendment is that? Because you want to imply that the status quo isn't just a negotiation that we have had as a society. It's something objective, something philosophical, something legal baked into those few words. It's not there. We get to decide as a responsible society, or at least aspirationally a responsible society, since we clearly are not one, where exactly we draw the line. You're going to try to draw the line where it financially benefits gun manufacturers. We're going to choose to draw the line where it protects kids, or at least we're going to fight to try to draw the line.
And see that Memphis mass shooting that killed 4 people, that's going to spark the debate again to ban guns, and we should not ban guns for this particular reason. Just recently, we had a mass stabbing in Canada, 10 people killed, 18 people injured. So, based off of that, should we ban knives? No. Canada totally has a big restriction on guns. Well, someone got a hold of a knife, 2 people, and they killed more than twice as many people as the guy killed in Memphis. So, people are the problem, not guns.
I recently heard Blair White, a YouTuber, say, people aren't the problem, behavior is. It wasn't exactly under that direct quote, but that was what she was getting at. And people aren't the problem, behavior is. And allowing mental illness is a behavior. You're enabling it. Enabling people to do things that, as a society, as a group of humans we have looked down upon forever, should not be enabled. And guns are not the problem. It's the mentality and the people behind it. Just like Lisa Kime said earlier, it's not the tool, it's the person that's using the tool. That's what we need to get clear. And personally, I am a small government kind of guy. I believe that control should go back to the state, and when necessary, involve federal law when it's interstate commerce and specific certain other things like that. I guess if California wants to ban guns, that's on them. However, then we're not a United States of America, and the Constitution's what unites us. So, going back on what I just said, I guess there are certain things I think states have to oblige by. And then beyond that, abortion. If California wants to make abortion legal, and it's not federally illegal, it's not constitutionally illegal, then it doesn't involve me here in the state of Maine. I do personally think it's wrong. I do personally think you're taking life. If bacteria on Mars is life, then a heartbeat here on Earth is life, and there's a heartbeat after like 7 days or very short amount of time, and even before that, I believe it's still human life. So I don't believe that abortion is right. But that's not what this video is about. What I am saying is that certain things should be state issues. Most things should be state issues. Certain things should be federal issues. And no matter what I say in this video, I want you to do the research for yourself. Look into all of this. Break this all down for yourself. Don't just trust me. Don't just trust any one commentator. Don't trust any one news source. Do your own investigation. Do your own research. Research. I think that in modern day is what's going to save us the most.
Last week, we told you the legislature's Judiciary Committee originally chose not to hold a hearing, but state Republicans argued doing so would violate a Maine law passed in 2019 requiring public hearings to be held for citizens' initiatives. A hearing was officially scheduled. It's happening at 3 o'clock tomorrow at the State House. The red flag proposal would allow family members of a person in crisis to petition a judge to take away their guns if they are a danger to themselves or others. Now, under the current yellow flag law, that process must be started by law enforcement.
There's a lot of folks on both sides of this that have strong opinions on it, and that's the whole purpose of a public hearing, is to allow opinions from all sides to come and present the facts so that Maine voters can make an informed decision in November.
Senator Harrington added that he thinks it was ridiculous they had to fight for this hearing, saying that the law clearly states public hearings on referenda are required. We have reached out to Democrats for comment, but we have not heard back.
Truthfully, it is absolutely ridiculous that Republicans had to try to force a public forum for this kind of subject, because it involves all of us. And these politicians that are in air conditioning units that spend all their time inside chatting and sitting, while the rest of us are out in the weather, laboring hours upon hours, and they only work January through June. Get off your high horse. And like the fact that Democrats were reached out to and they didn't respond, it's almost like they knew that this would happen and they didn't want to have to account for it because they lost, because the forum ended up happening and they didn't want it. And I begin to wonder, because they work January through June, is that because they're just trying to hurry up and get to summer? Because that's so sus. Like, why do they only work January through June and they make far more money than the average American? For sure average American, but absolutely more than the average Mainer. And they just want to have summer vacay and come back in the fall? What is that? I have a lot of thoughts, and I don't want to ramble. This video is actually already longer than I meant it to be, but that doesn't matter because this information is important and it needs to get out there. So instead of me rambling, we're going to go ahead and listen to the lawyer we heard from before. So let's dig in.
Because of the pandemic, there are a lot of new gun owners in America, and rightfully so. The pandemic has exposed the fragility of the stability of our society. It's forcing a lot of people to accept the fact that at any moment, there can be a breakdown in society, forcing them to be completely dependent on themselves for their safety. So naturally, they go and buy the most effective means to protect themselves: a gun. Now, as a new gun owner, I want you to imagine a few weeks or months or even years from now, you're sitting at home with your family, the very reason why you bought the gun in the first place, and the police knock on your door and tell you that they're there to take your guns because somebody you didn't know about had some secret meeting with the judge and told them that you're a danger to yourself or other people and should have your guns taken away. But you're a little confused because you haven't committed a crime. Now you're asking yourself, how can they do that? I have a Second Amendment, I have a Fourth Amendment, and I have a 14th Amendment right. I haven't broken any laws. How the hell can the cops just show up at my house and take away my rights without even charging me with a crime? I'll tell you how. Red flag laws. Red flag laws, or extreme risk protection orders, as some states call them, are state laws that allow law enforcement, family members, friends, romantic partners, co-workers, or close associates to ask courts to confiscate the guns of someone who a judge believes is a danger to himself or others based on a one-sided story of the people asking the judge. Considering the most recent spate of mass shootings by people who we later learned were dealing with mental health issues, I can see how the masses might be seduced by the idea of red flag laws. However, red flag laws are like a lot of people's Tinder profiles. On paper, red flag laws look great, but in the real world, they're a flaming hot catfish with massive teeth and an appetite for devouring civil liberty.
Well, that's one reason I stopped dating. I was going to talk about the 2nd, 4th, and 14th Amendment here, but that's a whole nother video at this point because this video is getting on. And actually, I'm excited about that because I'm a big proponent of the 2nd Amendment. As an American, I don't know how you can't be. And let's be clear, I don't even own a gun at this point. But that doesn't mean that I want to infringe upon anyone else's right to do so. And another video that we need to investigate is people in the past that have committed crimes, that domestic abuse, whether they were found, well, if they were found guilty of something that didn't even involve guns. Say they were threatening to ruin someone's clothes. But that can be considered a domestic abuse, and then their guns can be taken from them permanently. Does that seem right? So, there's a lot more to talk about regarding gun rights, and I look forward to doing so. Let me know in the comments down below if you'd like to hear more of that, or specifically what you'd like to hear more about. But I want to end this video with a little bit more from the lawyer, just because he's so good. So let's just get back into it.
Red flag laws take inherently flawed human judges and expect them to become these quasi-fortune tellers based on a one-sided story. Our legal system is based on judges making decisions about crimes already committed, not about crimes that they may or may not be committing in the future. The first problem with red flag laws is due process, or the lack thereof. Too many people think the right to own a gun is a privilege. Driving a car is a privilege. Public education is a privilege. Public housing is a privilege. Owning a gun, however, is a right, which means it can only be taken from you if you're charged and convicted of a crime. Red flag laws not only not charge you with a crime, you're presumed guilty of a crime you haven't been charged with. But because someone had a secret meeting with a judge about you, the cops can now come and confiscate your guns immediately. Police randomly showing up at a gun owner's house to confiscate their guns, even though the gun owner hasn't broken the law. I wonder what could go wrong.
An Anne Arundel County man is dead after officers say he refused to give up his gun to police.
Officers shot and killed him at his home this morning, where they were attempting to enforce the new red flag law.
And another thing, if you live with someone that also has a gun, they might take their gun too. I mean, if the whole point of this law is to prevent this person from gaining access to a firearm, it only makes sense to take all the guns in the house, right? Now you have two people with their rights violated because of a secret meeting with a judge by a person who risks little to nothing as far as consequence if they're lying. But who are we kidding? No one ever lies about someone being abusive and a danger purely out of spite.
Johnny's lawyers say Johnny's career has suffered because of the abuse allegations she made against him.
Well, there you have it. There is so many thoughts that I have, and when I built this video yesterday before filming today, I erroneously believed that I could cover this all in a proficient amount of time. I was so wrong, because there's even more to dig into, because again, reiterating what the dude just said, two people's constitutional rights. or more could be violated because of red flags. That's like biting away at the fur until you finally get to the meat of the issue. That's what they're trying to do with red flag laws. That quote came from Tim Marquis. Shout out, Tim. So to keep this video as short as I can because it's already long, I'm gonna cut it here. We're gonna follow up more. Let me know which aspects you personally want followed up on the most down in the comments below. The engagement helps. I'm not gonna take long. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Until next time, y'all, this has been Drew Hoagland with The Main Perspective.
Ready? Fight!